In this review, we're going to look at cell structures. So we're going to start with membranes. Remember, they're mostly made of lipids, specifically phospholipids, and these are arranged in a bilayer. So here we have a phospholipid with its phosphate head that likes water and its fatty acid tail that hates water. They're arranged in this bilayer. Notice that the water-loving heads are on the inside and outside. And then we also have carbohydrates that act as communication, like signs on a fence, and proteins that act as the gates that allow things to come in and out. Now, membranes are important because they control what goes in and out of the cell, because they're selectively permeable, meaning that only certain things can come in and out. All cells have a membrane around them called the plasma membrane, and eukaryotes have membranes around some of their organelles, which we call membrane-bound organelles. Now here's an example of a cell that shows the plasma membrane, and notice how it is separating the water that's inside the cell from the water outside the cell. That's one of the primary functions of a membrane. Now here we have a eukaryote and a prokaryote, and they both have a plasma membrane because all cells have this. However, here we have an example of a membrane-bound organelle. Only eukaryotes have these. So now let's look at prokaryotes. These are the first living things. Bacteria are the only things that are prokaryotes. Only bacteria. They're simple and unicellular, very small. They have no membrane-bound organelles, so always remember, pro has no. So let's look at some of the parts. Like all cells, they have a plasma membrane that controls what goes in and out of the cell. Many of them have a cell wall on the outside of that provides rigidity and protection. They have a cytoplasm, which is just the fluid inside the cell. Ribosomes, which are the enzymes that help assemble proteins. DNA, which in the case of a prokaryote is circular. And then they also have plasmids, which are these small pieces of DNA in addition to their regular DNA. Many of them also have a flagellum that helps them move. Now let's compare this with eukaryotes. So remember, all cells, every cell on Earth has a plasma membrane, cytoplasm, and ribosomes. Now eukaryotes evolved from prokaryotes. They are everything else that's not a bacteria. They're larger, they're more complex, they have linear DNA, and they do have membrane-bound organelles. So pro has no, but you do. So now let's look at these membrane-bound organelles and other parts of eukaryotes. So here we have the nucleus, which has its own membrane, because it's a membrane-bound organelle. And it's the boss, because it holds the DNA, and that DNA is linear. We have a mitochondria, which again has its own membranes. It's the powerhouse of the cell, and it makes energy through aerobic respiration. So remember, that requires oxygen. Chloroplasts make food found mostly in plants, and that's the site of photosynthesis. So chloroplasts color the plants. And remember, both of these have those folded membranes, more surface area, more efficient reactions. The vacuole stores food and water. It's bigger in plants, but it's found in both plants and animals. And so here we have an example of an animal cell and a plant cell. And notice the only differences between animals and plants are the fact that plants have chloroplasts and they also have a cell wall. Otherwise, they have all the same parts. Now when we compare prokaryotes and eukaryotes, both of them have plasma membranes, cytoplasm, ribosomes, because all cells do. At least some examples have a cell wall, and they all have DNA. Prokaryotes, though, are unicellular, as opposed to eukaryotes, which are uni or multicellular. They're small, simple, with no membrane-bound organelles, whereas eukaryotes are larger, complex, and do have membrane-bound organelles. Bacteria are the only examples of prokaryotes, and everything else is a eukaryote. So now you need to be able to basically fill out this chart here. So we have all the organelles and what they do. Make sure you know that. Now remember, all cells, and this is super important, plasma membrane, cytoplasm, ribosomes. All cells have these. You can't really be a cell and a living thing without them. And then the nucleus, the mitochondria, the chloroplasts, and the vacuole. Those 4 organelles are membrane bound, meaning that prokaryotes do not have them. Now when we look at the rest of them, some prokaryotes have a cell wall, as do plants. Animals don't. Plants and animals both have a nucleus. They both have mitochondria, but only plants have chloroplasts because they're the only ones who can do photosynthesis, and then they both have a vacuole. So again, if you know this chart, you're probably good to go.